All right, welcome back for day 2 of the Genesis method. Today, we're going to be talking through Genesis chapter 1, verse 6 through verse 8. This is the second day of creation and the creation story in the 7 days. Now, remember, yesterday was really about establishing our core motivators, which is the long-term idea of what we want to be known for in life. Then we went through and we took 5 key areas in our life, 5 overlapping areas where we have different roles, we express ourselves differently, and we actually sat down and we wrote protective statements about what we want to be like at the end of the year in each of these 5 areas. Essentially, these statements that we made were basically really broad vision statements. I like to call these bookend statements. They're statements that guide you and guide your course throughout the year of how you're using your resources in each of those 5 areas. Now, remember, we have our 5 areas listed here. Our 5 areas are personal, home, work, creativity, and relational. And in these 5 areas, we move through what each one looks like according to our core motivators so that we can really start to establish a cadence and a rhythm for our life. That is a timing and beat and like that kind of stepping of time, and also it can establish that cadence, the call and response back to our Creator, holding that vision in place. Well, today, our key word that we're going to talk about is elevating your perspective. Now, in the second day of the creation story, we see that there was water spread out throughout and around the earth, and God actually separates the waters. Scripture says that He puts an expanse between the waters. So He has an expanse, and that there's waters above and there's water below, and He calls that expanse heavens. Now, He's not referring to where He is enthroned in heavenly places. He's referring to the stars in the sky, the nighttime, which is how we govern our day and our night, light and darkness. So remember, the first day, He establishes light and darkness, the broad boundaries, the bookends. Then on the second day, He establishes how man knows to see the bookends. Today, we're going to talk about elevating our perspective, because yesterday was all about what is the vision for you in each of these 5 areas? How do you want that to look at the end of a certain time period or at the end of this coming year? Today, we're going to switch our conversation, and we're really going to talk about what is an elevated perspective of these 5 areas of our life. So when I'm talking about an elevated perspective, I want you to think about that classic statement where people say you can't see the forest from the woods or the trees right in front of you. What that statement is really saying to people is oftentimes we get so micro-focused in our life, we lose perspective of knowing where the forest ends, where the forest begins, what is the tree line. Any true person who was a Boy Scout, a Cub Scout, a Girl Scout, or just loves camping knows that when you are charting your course and your direction, you use a compass and you set your compass and your scale according to the concept of true north. Well, in the old days of pioneering and exploring, they used the stars in the sky to navigate. The stars kept them in alignment with the vision so that they moved in the proper direction. So today, we're going to be writing down elevated statements according to our 5 areas of our life. These are broad perspectives, and they're statements not just about our vision for this coming year, but they're elevated statements based on either who God has said we are, who our Creator has inspired us to be. They're statements that aren't based on what we accomplish, but they're really based on our value and our identity within each of these roles. So, for example, you might have said in the area of work that your vision, or yesterday you might have said that you put down that protective boundary statement that at the end of this year, you want your work to be a place where you have great success, increased contact, you're growing in promotion, or you have this great sense of responsibility. But our elevated perspective says, in my work, I want to grow in my skills so that I can have a spirit of excellence no matter where I'm placed, or how I'm being utilized. Essentially, an elevated perspective is saying, without the basic circumstances around me, if I remove those circumstances and I just hold true to who I am, who I know I am, who God has called me to be, who the Creator has made me, what is the elevated perspective over me and my life in this area? It's a declaration, it's a statement, it's basically an identity statement in that area. And that statement serves as a guide for you no matter the circumstances of this coming year. Certainly, we can all look back on this past year and say, wow, we had surprises. I didn't see that coming. I didn't see that coming. But what an elevated perspective does is it allows you to hold true to who you are in each of these 5 areas, no matter the highs and the lows, the successes, the unknowns that life brings at you. Remember, the first thing you did yesterday is you made the bookends. Today, you're writing the elevated perspective statements to accompany those bookends. So you have the boundaries so that you don't go out to the right or to the left too far. That's your vision that you wrote down yesterday, those protective statements. Today, you're writing your elevated perspective so that no matter where you're going, you can still look up, you can still keep your course going, and you don't get overwhelmed by the highs and lows and the unknowns of life. That's our focus today. Our key here is have a broad picture view in these 3 areas based on inspiration from God, from our Creator. Now, the final thing that I want you to do is under each of these 5 statements that you're writing down, these 5 statements of elevated perspective, 1 sentence for each area, I want you to write underneath it 3 exercises that you can enter into now to help safeguard that elevated perspective. So for example, perhaps in your home, it's important for you to have order and have emotional peace. And so what I want you to do is write down what are 3 things that you can put in place, 3 exercises that you can take part in, not long-term, just short-term, that can help safeguard. What I mean by that is, do you have a fellow friend who understands the importance of having a structured home? Maybe you have an Instagram person that you can follow who actually brings order and structure to the home. And that can just serve to remind you and keep your perspective elevated. So 3 exercises that you're going to begin to incorporate into your life to protect that elevated perspective. Remember, we had our bookends yesterday. Today, we're setting our perspective in place so that we can continually move no matter if the current surroundings around us change, our experiences change. We've got our eyes focused. We know where we're going.